Welcome back to Intersection, a program of KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. I'm Ryan Famulner, and today we're talking about the statewide 3/4-cent sales tax proposal on the August ballot that would go to fund transportation projects across the state for the next 10 years. Opponents and proponents are both passionate about the proposal, which would generate an estimated $5.4 billion over the next 10 years. Joining me in studio today to talk about it, Roberta Breaker is the Chief Financial Officer for the Missouri Department of Transportation, and Dave Sylvester is the Central District Engineer for MoDOT. Joining us by Skype is Amy Bluen, the Executive Director of the Missouri Budget Project. And we'd love to hear from you in our audience as well. Do you have questions about the sales tax proposal from MoDOT officials? They're here in studio and can answer your questions. Just give us a call at 573-882-8925, or you can email intersection@kbia.org. You could also tweet us at intersectkbia, or you could join our online chat. So just to pick up from where we were before we took the break, we were talking a little bit about that list that came out. So again, some of the money every year is going to go toward these statewide projects, and some will also go toward these local regional projects, correct? Yeah,
correct.
Dave?
As part of the bill, 5% will come off the top and go to cities and counties each, so respective 5% or 10% total. And the cities and counties can use that to do any kind of construction project or any type of work that is transportation related in nature. And that could be buying equipment, that could be buying material for roads, it could be enhancing transit within their own areas, it could be repaving city streets or county roads or anything like that. So that's part of what's in this bill. The things that we focused on with our list were, as Roberta mentioned, these are things that we've known about for a long time, and bringing all these things together and bringing them to the table helped us kind of put together a list and divvy up the money from very large jobs to some very, very smaller jobs, but yet still jobs that did a couple of things. He either created safety, promoted economic development, or did both. And and all of them we feel is part of taking care of the system type work. And those are the three of the things that three of the four pillars that Missourians told us they really wanted us to focus on. Mm-hmm. Roberta mentioned the On the Move campaign we did last year, and there were four things that came out of that: take care of the system, do safety work, create jobs or promote work that enhances economic development, and then we'd like a better choice of other modes of transportation. And so those were a lot of the work. And so you'll see in this list, you're going to see some stuff in there of the other modes of transportation.
Yeah, well, in Boone County, we have the airport and a terminal at the airport, right?
Absolutely. And as we met with our planning partners, that was a priority that came out of this as a new terminal. And it's something that we're going to partner with the city on. If we can do this and move this forward, we were going to partner with the city 50-50 on this terminal. It's a great piece for the airport. It's something that the airport is continuing to grow. As they do add flights in and out. There's also some runway work for the airport and a little parking lot addition to it. But there's also some bicycle and pedestrian facilities that when we met with the city, they had some priorities there that they wanted. And there's also the addition of some transit, adding some extra service hours every day during the week to make that service available for riders longer. And that's that's something that really helps, I think, boost transit in any town that can use it or have it, actually.
I guess I had a question just in general about this priority list and how it'll be used. Again, it'll go through this kind of process where people are going to be able to weigh in on it. And then once this is finalized, is this going to be a list that MoDOT will be accountable to if this passes? It is? Yeah?
Yeah, the legislation is very specific about providing an annual report on fulfilling the promises that we made. And that's very much how we view this. This is a promise to the public. So we're out in the public comment period right now. That will run through 5 o'clock on Thursday, July 3rd. And then we'll close down the public comment period. We'll put all those comments together. We'll, throughout this time, be thinking about, do we need to make adjustments to the project list? On Wednesday, July 9th, we'll be presenting the final project list to the Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission for approval, and then once they approve it, it is the project list, and it is what voters will be voting on come August 5th.
Sure.
And then annually, we'll be reporting back on the progress we've made in delivering the projects that we promised.
Sure. Okay. And actually, we are joined now by Thomas Shrout Jr. He's the treasurer of Missourians for Better Transportation Solutions. Thomas, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. So I think you've been listening in for the last 2 minutes of the conversation here. I just wanted to first of all, just tell us a little bit about your organization and I guess your stance on this tax measure we've been talking about here today.
Well, we're a group of volunteers who came together because we're concerned about the way this measure would be funded, and that is through the general sales tax. That's unprecedented in Missouri and rare in any other state in the country. And what that means is there's lots of truck traffic that doesn't start in Missouri and doesn't end in Missouri and just passes through the state. And the biggest project of all is the rebuild of Interstate 70. And because of the funding mechanism proposed is through the sales tax, that means that the trucks passing through Missouri would pay nothing for the improvement of Interstate 70. And while people involved in my effort, myself included, have been involved in transportation advocacy for many, many years, we feel like we need to continue this conversation about making these improvements, but the funding mechanism is totally off base.
So what would be better, I guess, and to your point about the trucks using the highway, what might be another option? We mentioned toll roads earlier, but what could help them, I guess, bear a bigger burden?
Well, I didn't hear the portion about toll roads, and that's something that I'm told does not poll well, but I think MoDOT and the legislature owe it to the citizens of Missouri to get out there and talk about the benefits of tolling. I mean, I live in St. Louis, and you think, well, I might use 70. I don't use 70 very much. You know, it's people passing through that use it and ought to pay a greater share for its upkeep and improvement. Especially the truckers. I mean, this proposal has the truckers paying nothing for these improvements that would take place on Interstate 70 and eventually down the road, I presume, on Interstate 44.
And so what would you suggest? I guess, is that what you would suggest, or what do you think? What have other states done? I guess is another way to phrase that question. What have other states done that you think is successful?
Well, for instance, there's the Kansas Turnpike. There's the Oklahoma Turnpike. There's toll roads in Illinois. Those are states that abut Missouri, and certainly Kansas and Oklahoma are as conservative as Missouri is, yet they have toll roads. Also, I think the gas tax could be increased. And again, I think if the voters are educated about why the gas tax makes sense and not the sales tax would hit my dad, who's 94 years old, lives in Lenore there in Columbia, and would not hit the truckers. Now, how fair is that? I mean, come on.
I wonder, we talked briefly again, Roberta, about tolls earlier, but I guess any other thoughts you have, or Dave, on tolls and the likelihood of that, or the sales tax, and the gas tax, rather?
I think the toll discussion was pretty robust 2 years ago in the legislature. One limiting factor is that under existing federal law, you can't just decide to toll an interstate. You have to get approval from the Federal Highway Administration and the administration, and we actually have a conditional letter of approval to do that. There are 4 or 5 of them around the nation. Now, lately, the Obama administration has talked about lifting that restriction, but it hasn't occurred yet. So it really, to toll any place, you have to first get Congress or the federal administration to let you do that. Then you have to overcome the concerns that were pretty robust 2 years ago about, well, pick Columbia. I drive on I-70 all the time. You're going to toll me to drive around to get to work, to do all that kind of stuff. So you have to figure out how you're going to accomplish that. It could work. The tolling could work as a model to help maintain I-70, to help rebuild I-70. But you have to get enough legislators lined up and be willing to give you that opportunity.
Right. Again, to take on something that seems as pretty unpopular, right?
Seems to be, yeah. And I don't discount the fact that other states have done this and done this successfully. I think it could work as a model, but you have to first get the permission to do it.
I wonder. Sorry. Go ahead.
Can I comment on
Yes,
that?
of course. Go ahead.
Well, Roberta, is it Roberta?
Yes, sir.
Said that, they had a robust discussion in the legislature, and of course they represent the people of Missouri, but I think the discussion needs to go beyond the legislature. It needs to occur with the people who, ultimately are paying for it and ultimately voting on it. And that kind of discussion needs to occur, and people need to understand that modern tolling isn't stopping at a toll booth and throwing 2 quarters into the basket. It's all done electronically. It's all very efficient and can be done successfully.
Amy, I wonder if you've heard any other alternatives, or I guess anyone else at the table that knows of any other alternatives other than what we've been discussing so far that other states have maybe considered.
Yeah, well, one of the things, actually, I'm glad you asked that question, because one of the items that I wanted to come back and clarify from earlier is Senator Lamping mentioned, trying to divert some of the general revenue funding that the state has to transportation. And I would caution against that. We've got a lot of very diverse needs right now that are underfunded in the state, including K-12 education, higher education, and other services. So I would really just want to point out that general revenue is not an option at this time. However, I do think that the legislature came fairly close to considering a tolling option, and that might be something that could be put forth to them again. I do think that there are issues in rural areas with people going from one county to another to access medical services that would have to be dealt with in the case of a toll road situation. But that's not on the table right now. What's on the table is this sales tax.
Right. And I guess another thing to point out is under this, if this does pass, MoDOT wouldn't be able to make any other changes, right? A toll road we couldn't create a toll road 3 years from now because that's part of the conditions of this sales tax increase.
Right. The legislation provides that for the 10 years that this is in effect, the gas tax could not be increased, and we couldn't toll any roads in Missouri.
Right. And so that might address any concerns that this is just one.
The first swing.
Right. Well, I guess I wanted to pick that apart too. So if this does pass, you mentioned, Amy, the general revenue situation. What happens to MoDOT's general revenue allotment if now there's this huge source of money that wasn't there before? Does that loosen some money up for some of these other departments in the state, or will MoDOT keep their allotment? Do we know what would happen? I mean, that's down the road, I guess. But
the state of Missouri actually spends very little general revenue on transportation, $9 to $10 million a year for Amtrak. For last year, the state or the legislature appropriated $3 million for ports, and they did the same thing again this year. About $1.5 million for transit statewide. And essentially, that's about it for transportation. So it's a pretty small amount of the general revenue budget of the state. Most of all of the transportation is from the gas tax or the license fees or the sales tax on motor vehicles. So what would happen to those appropriations if this passed that would be the legislature's decision when they come back next year.
Sure. And Amy, we saw you reacting there to some of that, what was being said there. Sorry, I'll let you weigh in.
No, that's right. I think that, already transportation gets very, very little, a minuscule amount really of general revenue in the state.
Right.
So if we were to divert general revenue to transportation, something else would get hurt. That's not a viable option.
Right. Thomas, I heard you wanting to weigh in there.
Yeah, well, one of my concerns and is that I frequently use Amtrak between St. Louis and Kansas City, and for the last 25 years I've gone down to the legislature to make sure that appropriation stays in place. Now here we are asking the taxpayers for several $1 billion, and yet MoDOT's list does not include Amtrak as part of its funding proposal. So it still means that I would have to go back to Jeff City and go hat in hand to get that. I think it's $9 million a year, as Amy said, for the twice-a-day service. Much less do what Illinois is doing, has gone from 3 to 5 trains a day from St. Louis to Chicago, and we'll have 110-mile-an-hour service here. I think it's sometime next year.
So is there a reason why Amtrak wasn't included in the list so far, or could it be?
It could be, and there was a reason why we didn't. And Lots of people talk about what happened when the lottery came into effect in Missouri. Oh, it's going to increase by enormous amounts of money the funding for K through 12. And then the sense is, well, that money went through to K through 12 and the existing money went to something else. And so our thought is, if the voters would pass this, then it shouldn't be to supplant the money that's already being allocated to transportation. But in the end, we would have to see what the legislature decided to do.
I want to take a moment to remind our audience this is Intersection, a program of KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. I'm Ryan Famulner, and today we're talking about the statewide 3/4-cent sales tax proposal on the August ballot that would go to fund transportation projects across the state for the next 10 years. Opponents and proponents are both passionate about the proposal, which would generate an estimated $5.4 billion over the next 10 years. Joining me in studio today to talk about it, Roberta Breaker is the Chief Financial Officer for the Missouri Department of Transportation, and Dave Sylvester is the Central District Engineer for MoDOT. Joining us by Skype, Amy Bluen is the Executive Director of the Missouri Budget Project, and joining us by phone is Thomas Schrout, Jr., the Treasurer of Missourians for Better Transportation Solutions. And we'd love to hear from you in our audience as well. What do you think about the concerns of the opponents of the sales tax increase? Let us know by giving us a call at 573-882-8925 or email intersection@kbia.org. You could also tweet us at intersectkbia. And you mentioned, Roberta, the car registrations, all these other things that the Department of Transportation has had to take on as possible revenue sources. Like, those are kind of small fixes, right? As far as what are some of the other things that currently the Missouri Department of Transportation is getting its budget from?
The main three sources are the gas tax, the licenses and fees for either licensing your car or your driver's license, and then the motor vehicle sales tax. So those are the three main sources. There is, for aviation, there's a dedicated per gallon aviation fuel tax. There are very small fees that help with railroad crossing safety, but really it's those three main sources that fund roads and bridges in Missouri.
Mm-hmm. And Amy, I wonder your thoughts too, just on the big picture of the budget situation in the state, what these different departments are having to do. As we've been talking about, it's really transportation and education and all these other departments all pulling from this small pot. What other options are there for other departments? And are we going to have to see other departments, looking for options like this to generate some new revenue as things shrink?
Yeah, sure. The general revenue situation in the state is not good right now. Our revenue is coming in basically flat from last year compared to last year. And we're looking at potential for significant cuts as a result of that. We already know that K-12 education funding is currently about $600 million underfunded under the required funding levels. Higher education receives less funding today than it did a few years ago prior to the recession. Health and mental health still receive less services today than they did prior to the recession as well. So everything is still recovering from the economic recession. And then the legislature passed a series of tax reductions this year. Not only Senate Bill 509, which goes into effect in fiscal year 2017, but also a number of bills that were passed in the final day of the legislative session. And combined, all of those bills will reduce state revenue by $1 billion when they're fully phased in. So we've got a cliff in general revenue programs and services, as well as the cliff that we face in transportation.
Right. We actually have a call on the line. David from Columbia. David, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, yeah, thanks for calling in today.
Thank you. Hey, I need a little clarification here. I know that the proposed sales tax excludes fuel tax, but I don't know why it excludes the fuel tax.
Okay, thanks. That's a good question, David. Why it excludes it?
There is not currently a sales tax on fuel, and essentially when the legislature set this up, they excluded the things that are currently not taxed with the statewide sales tax. So that's food, prescription medicines, and fuel.
I think it's also big trucks, is it not?
Well, there are a number of other exemptions from sales tax, but the three that you most often hear about and that most every every taxpayer faces on a regular basis is they're buying food, they're buying medicine, and oftentimes they're buying fuel. And those three are excluded from this new sales tax as from the existing sales taxes.
Well, I stand corrected, but I believe in 2012 the legislature exempted the purchase of big trucks and truck equipment from the general sales tax, whereas you and I, when we go out and buy an automobile, we pay that general sales tax.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have the answer in our heads at the table.
I'm not conversant on that, sorry.
Okay. And David, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so Amy, do you know the answer to that maybe? I just figured I'd ask since you may know, but...
I don't know. I know that there have been a number of exemptions related to manufacturing, and some of that was multimodal transportation related, but I don't know the full answer to that.
Okay, all right. So I guess one thing I wanted to ask you about a little bit, Dave, was that process that we're going through again with the review of all these proposals. How are those going to be considered, be created rather, by the cities and counties that are going to be able to put together proposals for different projects? You know, I mean, again, the statewide MoDOT will be looking at different projects they want to work on a statewide level. But how is that process going to work for cities and counties to pick which projects are most important?
Well, the projects that we were going to fund with the 90% of this tax that comes to MoDOT, we've done that. We've engaged our folks. That's what this list is for.
Mm-hmm.
The 10%, and I'm not sure if maybe this is what you're asking. The 10%, 5% goes to cities, 5% goes to counties.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to really leave that up to them. I mean, if they want some help or guidance from us, we are planning partners. We are transportation partners. We'd be more than happy to help folks if on their system, if they needed help with guidance. I mean, we can't do the work for them, but if they wanted to know what's the best solution to maybe seal this type of a road, we have a lot of experience in that. We'd be more than happy to help them in picking those types of things.
Okay, so,
I'm not sure if that's addressed.
No,
the
it
question
was. So really, it's more just like a fund distribution than it is an approval of a project proposed by a city or county. Yeah.
The legislation does not require cities and counties to put together their own project list for the share that comes to them.
Okay.
So certainly we're hopeful that they are thinking about that, and they are saying, oh, wow, we could do this, we could do whatever it is that we think is the best use of that fund, but there's no requirement in the law for them to do that.
Okay. And I guess, Thomas, you mentioned earlier Amtrak. I mean, is there anything else, as you've looked at this this proposal for the draft of the proposal list, anything else that piqued your interest, anything you thought was missing from the proposals we have right now?
Well, I would, if I were writing the list, one of the things MoDOT talks about is safety, and I think if that's really a concern, there ought to be a statewide strategy to get people to be using the safer modes of transportation, which are trains, planes, buses, biking, and walking, and place a greater emphasis on those modes of transportation than what this particular plan does. And the problem with safety is drivers who are fatigued, drivers who are drunk, drivers who are texting, and drivers who are talking on cell phones. That's the safety issue, and it's not so much the roads or the road design or the bridges. It's distracted driving and impaired driving.
Right. So I guess one thing, this is kind of funny to end with this question or get close to the end, but Roberta and Dave, and maybe Amy could help with this too, how did we get to the place that we are now with our state budget, with especially the transportation budget? We're proposing the biggest sales tax in Missouri, period. How did it really get to this point in previous years? What should have happened in the past to prevent this, I guess?
I guess my reaction to that is that many sources of revenue are growing sources of revenue. Sales taxes tend to grow over time because things tend to cost more over time. Income taxes tend to rise over time because people tend to earn more over time. The fuel tax is a declining revenue source because it's a flat tax rate and people are driving less and cars are more fuel efficient. So it will never keep up. I can go back to 2006. That was the high water mark of state fuel taxes. It was $520 million. and now it's around 480 million. So it's really declined a lot in just a relatively short number of years, and it's predicted to continue to do so. So that's why we are where we are.
And
Dave.
if I could
Sure.
add that the cost of what we do and the materials that we use have gone up significantly. The gas tax is not something that's changed in a number of years, since 1992.
Since 1992.
But yet concrete, steel, and asphalt, probably the three biggest things that we use in roadway construction and roadway maintenance, have doubled and tripled in cost. And it's very similar. The cost of butter has gone up, the cost of cheese, the cost of propane, and not unlike that, so have our materials gone up. And so the funding, as Roberta's talking about, has not kept pace and gone up with it, and is now actually declining because of the factors of people driving less or higher mile per gallon vehicles.
Because of inflation, the 17-cent gas tax that was last raised in 1992 now has 8 cents of purchasing power.
Oh, wow. Okay. And Amy, I think I heard you about to jump in there at some point. Yeah, what are your thoughts on how we got here, I guess?
Well, I think that what has already been said is exactly right, but also we've had drops in extraordinary money that was available from the federal government, as well as some bonding revenues that are going away, that have kind of bridged transportation funding up until this point. And those big sources are dwindling.
I wonder, just with about a minute or two left here in the show, we heard from both the politicians at the beginning of the show about whether they thought this would pass or not. I wonder the thoughts of people we have in the conversation right now, and what the likelihood is of how this might play out, and what these next few months also are going to look like as in the lead up to that. Roberta?
I'm profoundly bad at predicting the future, so MoDOT's job is to produce the project list and do everything we can to educate people about what's on the list and what they get for their tax dollars, and that's what we're going to focus on.
Sure. Thomas, I think I heard you.
Well, I applaud the MoDOT people there for not advocating a yes vote as state employees. So thank you for being careful. I think it's got a hard way to go, and I think there's going to have to be more conversation in this state about how we do things. Part of the reason we are where we are, and I was around in 1992 when the 6-cent gas tax went into effect, is the Hancock Amendment. I mean, that's the boogeyman in the room, if you will. Just as an example, Kansas legislature, I think 2 years ago, raised its gas tax maybe 2 cents. I mean, Kansas isn't the tax and spend state of the nation. So some of these states are addressing these things as they go. And every time we have to do something in Missouri, it has to go to a vote of the people, and we're a republic. We're not a direct democracy. So I would like to see,
Well, Thomas, actually, I think I've lost you there, but we're going to have to end the show now anyway, because that's all the time that we have for today's intersection. Thanks so much to our guests today, Roberta Breaker, the Chief Financial Officer for the Missouri Department of Transportation, and Dave Sylvester, the Central District Engineer for MoDOT. Amy Bluen, the Executive Director of the Missouri Budget Project, joined us by Skype. Senators Mike Keogh of Jefferson City and John Lamping of St. Louis, and Thomas Schrout, Jr., with Missourians for Better Transportation Solutions. They all joined us by phone. We'd like to remind those of you enjoying this as a rebroadcast that Intersection takes place live for a full hour from 2 to 3 every Monday afternoon. I'm Ryan from Mueller. Thanks very much for joining us today, and have a great week.